Hello and welcome to the Housing Agency's second webinar on sustainability in housing and the built environment. My name is Shane Burke and I'm Head of Research at the Housing Agency. Today's webinar will focus on two research reports that were supported under our Research Support Programme, which is a call that's currently open until the 28th of August. So first we'll hear from Mike Allen, Director of Advocacy, Research and Communications at Focus Ireland on the report Attitudes and Effective Communication on Modern Methods of Construction. And then we will hear from Marion, Jammet, Director of Policy and Advocacy at the Irish Green Building Council on the report Recommendations for the Enhancement of Biodiversity in New Residential Developments. So each presentation will be around 15 to 20 minutes with time for questions and answers at the end. And then the webinar will finish at 12 o'clock. So Mike, I'll hand it over to you whenever you're ready.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Shane. I think that's come up now on the screen. So thanks very much for the invitation to talk about our research, which is about effective communications on modern methods of construction. So first of all, thanks to the Housing Agency, as Shane mentioned, for funding research. And then James Beaumont, who is a British researcher who drafted the literature review and some of the case studies. And then, as you'll see, the methodology of this is focus groups and a survey which was carried out by our colleagues in Amara Research. So when we're talking about modern methods of construction, it's useful and it emerges as quite an important issue in the debate in what is the definition. It's a phrase used to describe a range of building techniques which aim to improve efficiency, sustainability and quality in the construction industry. And unlike traditional methods, which often involve on-site construction with bricks and mortar, modern methods of construction focus on off-site construction and the use of prefabricated components. So it's not one way of doing things, it's a range of different ways of using industrial methods, off-site construction, prefabrication to build. So it's a sort of an umbrella type of phrase to describe a range of different things. And what are we doing here? So what we were wanting to do is we wanted to explore perceptions and attitudes of the public towards modern methods of construction, and then to look at ways in which we should best be communicating about modern methods of construction to build support. And the reason we were interested in this is because modern methods in Focus Ireland, we believe that modern methods of construction is an important component of increasing housing supply. But we'd also be very conscious of the way that it was very frequently invoked, or phrases meaning the same sort of things, or prefabs, or and so on, were invoked as quick fix solutions to very specific problems within the housing system. So when the Ukrainian refugees arrive, you get statements by the Department of Housing and Department of Justice saying that they're going to use modern methods of construction or prefabs or modular housing to house the people. And as you see I'll talk about in a moment, in the earliest times when modern methods of construction is discussed, it's often used as a quick fix solution to quite problematic areas. And we were concerned that the way it was habitually used in public discourse was building up a residue of public resistance and stigmatization of modern methods of construction, which would prove problematic in terms of getting the wider spread adoption that we felt was useful. So we thought it would be interesting to look at attitudes to this form of construction, and also then to think about and get some advice as to about how you would build public support or overcome any public resistance. So that's what we were looking at. So the first time, obviously modern methods of construction has existed probably since any form of construction. People have been talking about prefabs and different ways of doing things, and certainly there's a big post-war, post-emergency drive in lots of countries to do this. But in the Irish public policy, the first time it really emerges is Alan Kelly announcing that in response to the emerging housing crisis and a few deaths of homeless people, that he was going to build 500 rapid build houses for homeless families. And that's back in 2015. And he announces it several times, and several people we were brought out to visit these things on several occasions at the time. A year later, in Rebuilding Ireland, there's a commitment, a more broad commitment to expand and accelerate the programme, and talking about 1,500 social housing units produced through modern methods of construction. 5 years later, in Housing for All, you get the development of several naming of several initiatives in the programme to accelerate delivery. In actual fact, in Housing for All, you do get some significant progress. A roadmap is published for increasing adoption. There's an action plan for skills development, because the skills involved in modern methods of construction are different than traditional ones. And there's an industry capability working group established. And then just last year, in the new strategy delivering homes, there's a commitment that at least 25% of all new built social and affordable homes will be built using modern methods of construction. And even from that, you can see one of the issues is a lot of this debate emerges around affordable and social homes rather than commitments in terms of the broader house construction industry. So we undertook a literature review of what's been said about this before. What we found that most of the things about public attitudes were UK based. We couldn't find virtually anything in the Irish context around that. We really struggle in this. There's actually, while we have a definition to open up, which I started this presentation with, there's no existing agreed definition academia or in industry about what we're talking about here. But there is increased policy and business interest, and there's quite an indication in the literature that there are seen to be benefits from it: superior quality, speeding up the construction process, reducing costs, employment and skills agenda, reducing the impacting the residential life cycle, and environmental benefits as well. But lots of barriers: slow uptake, scale of investment is an industrial process. You can't do this on a small scale. You don't get the benefits. And then what we are concentrating on here is this area is a stigma and negative perception, and what impact that has on the adoption. So the methodology involved two elements. The first one was 6 focus groups. There were 3 types of focus groups we looked at. The one was pre-family renters, there was multi-generational family households, and there were empty nesters were the 3 types of focus groups we introduced. And we did 4 of them were face-to-face and 2 of them were online, the face-to-face in Dublin and Waterford, and the online ones allowed us to pick up more rural and small towns. And the focus groups are divided into 2 parts. One is, what are your attitudes to modern method construction? And then, what advice would you give about use of language when communicating modern methods of construction? And then there's a breakdown of where the target groups are. You can look at that if you're interested in that sort of thing in more detail on the slides, which will be available afterwards. And then there was a survey of 1,000 people using which was tailored on the Omnibus survey in September 25 that O'Morach do. And there were 7 questions, and that's the outline of the people who were interviewed. So the outcomes of the focus groups. So the good in terms of perceptions of modern method construction. There was an emphasis on its potential to rapidly deliver homes. There was a recognition or a perception that it can be modern in the sense of modern insulation, triple glazing, heat pumps, and so on. Green technologies were seen very much in that way. There was an expectation that off-site methods would reduce costs through efficiencies, and that it would create new jobs and new different types of jobs, which would overcome some of the challenges in terms of the labour force needs to build our housing, and also create new jobs for people in different places. The negative sides were many participants questioned whether modern methods of construction homes would last long, their long-term durability, and would they withstand decades of wear and tear. So they were seen as a short-term solution, or a shorter-term solution than traditional methods. Lots of descriptions saw things out of the box, prefab, like lacking character, especially compared with older homes, lacking distinct features, and so on. So they were seen as less aesthetically pleasing, uglier, or less attractive. And then there were related concerns that they can compromise workmanship. And then there was an association between the sorts of problems we see around durability and standards from the Celtic Tiger era in some ways being picked up and associated with modern methods of construction. And then people's association with prefab classrooms and porta cabins, leading them to associate modern methods of construction within permanence, lower standards, and so on. Again, remember what we're researching here is not are these things true, but what are the attitudes and perceptions. And as people who are from communications background or people who've thought about or know about this, when there are perceptual problems, the answer isn't always provide the facts. The facts are useful, but perceptual problems have a whole range of emotional, historical, and other implications with them as well. So it's not a matter of just putting people right. It's more complicated than that. In terms of addressing the housing crisis, there was a recognition that this can speed up supply, and that the benefits were clearly seen in terms of our overall housing problem. And it was also seen as an access to a possible access to a first home, which again, as you can see, has ambiguity in it. That's a good thing, access to a first home, but around that is implications around cheap, short term, not somewhere you'd want to stay forever. So there's that's a cuts both ways, that one. There's a recognition that high density modern methods of construction, apartment blocks and estates may meet the demand for more housing in urban areas. So it's seen as a urban solution. And a minority of participants saw it as more acceptable to use modern methods of construction for short-term or specialised housing, students, refugee accommodation, rather than forever homes. So there's a number of things which have a positive dimension and a negative one. But some people were aware of European examples where modular construction had been used to create family-orientated homes, and that these challenged the notion that modern methods of construction should be limited to quick fixes. And some of those European and Japanese models are picked up in the literature review in the report, if you want to look at those. So what they were saying in terms of language was that you should make clear that it is already in place. So emphasizing the newness of modern methods of construction was not necessarily the way to go with this. You need to be linking into the positive stories of what's already been achieved and the sorts of things that are built. Showcase the types of housing that are currently being built and how they differ from what was built during the Celtic Tiger era. So break that association with Celtic Tiger and Tiger era poorer quality housing and modern methods of construction. Provide clear information on quality assurance, longevity, and architectural design to show that these things are not necessarily limitations. And then address misunderstandings about what it means to be factory built by showing that could be high quality and certified as well. And then this is an interesting one which comes up in the recommendations, the need for a stronger coalition to develop between those who believe that modern method of construction is good, if not better, and that coalition needs to include developers, state agency, lenders, and people who are living in modern methods of construction homes and are positive about them. And to work hard to prevent modern methods of construction being positioned solely as a solution to social housing issues. As you noted in the policy statements, it's more than 25% of social and affordable housing is going to be built with MMC. So that sort of positions it as something at the bottom end of the market. It needs to be consciously positioned as something which is a universal solution, which can be applicable across every section of the community in different environments. So that was what came out of the focus groups. When we look at the 1,000 people we interviewed, we find that 63% of people had heard of the term. Higher awareness amongst men over 55, or at least men over 55 said they'd heard more about it. Maybe that reflects what men over 55 claim to know. What you term the term modern method of construction with, and there you can see people see it as warm, innovative. Then more negative ones, prefabricated, 18%, non-traditional materials, good quality modern builds, only 5%. So you can see that you're sort of a mixture between some positive and negative things here. Have you ever lived in MMC building? 11% of people said they had, 77% said they're not interesting, 12% didn't know. If you were specifically chose a home, as opposed to a traditional home. 50% of residents said that had lived in MMC said that they would choose a home built by MMC. So about half and half liked it, and a quarter of them wouldn't choose, and another quarter didn't care. Um, um, would you be happy to purchase a home if you had to move? And 17% of them said that they weren't opposed. So that's a relatively low number of people who are sort of totally negative to doing that, and 30% who are still unsure. So a lot of people to be won over. But over half will be happy to purchase an MMC home, and that was right across all the demographics. And then when they were asked to rate the following elements of modern method construction, you see, again, the same sort of thing, that very strong, fairly strong sort of recognition about energy performance, sustainability, and then less positive about affordability and durability and aesthetics. So durability and aesthetics, not attractive buildings that won't last is the sort of negative side, but ones which are of good, I suppose, climate change and energy performance elements come out strongly there. Um, so what extent do you think that homes building modern method constructions can be part of a long-term solution? And 6 in 10 respondents believe that it can help to long-term solutions. 10% said it wouldn't help, and 9% said it is the answer to the housing crisis. Well, 21% were unsure. So you've got quite a strong view there that people recognize where it fits in. Um, uh, that they see it as energy efficient and innovative, but they have concerns about quality and durability and uniformity. Um, uh, and a view coming from the research that people felt that a broad coalition of people who recognize the value of this should be built. The recommendations that come out of it is that the Department of Housing should convene that broader coalition to try and build public support away from where it currently stands, and the list of people who should be there. Case studies should be brought out. Real strong avoidance of traditional and old-fashioned terms, prefab, rapid build, and so on. They have negative connotations. They should be avoided. They damage what people are trying to achieve here. Accentuate the innovative and modern nature, but show that it has a tradition and has got a track record of building positive stuff, and really emphasize the quality assurance and longevity and the architectural design that's possible. And emphasize that regular housing planning legislation apply. It's not a quick fix in the sense that it dodges the standards and so on that apply to other housing, and acknowledge it and show that it has a significant role to alleviating Ireland's housing crisis in general, rather than concentrating it and emphasizing this social and affordable dimension, showing that it has wider implications right the way through. So that's a quick run through of what we were looking at there. As I say, it's a report which really concentrates on public perceptions and what could be done about it, rather than the detailed technical elements of it. But I think it provides a really strong basis for those who see the technical benefits to try and overcome some of the public perceptions, which are one of the factors which are slowing up adoption. So thank you, Shane.
Mike, thanks very much. That's great. Just to remind everyone also, so there is a Q&A function just at the bottom of the screen. If you want me to ask a question to our speakers after the presentations, if you just fire your questions in there to the Q&A, and we can go into them then after Marion's presentation. So Marion, when you're ready, please go ahead. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Shane, and good morning, everyone. Delighted to be with you this morning for this Sustainable Housing series, and a huge thanks to the Housing Agency for inviting us. I'm Marion Jammet. I'm from the Irish Green Building Council. Just very briefly, for those of you who do not know us, the Irish Green Building Council is a non-for-profit membership organization. We work to promote a more sustainable built environment in Ireland. And when I say that, I mean we look at things such as climate mitigation, climate adaptation, but also resource efficiency and ecological impact of the built environment. And we do it for a number of actions, including training for building professionals, advocacy, but also research, as we can see as part of this project. And just to be clear, like all our findings and research is very much based on desk-based research and also stakeholder engagement. And that's a process we did follow as part of the project I'm going to present on today, which is called BioNeighbors. It was a 12-month project funded by the Housing Agency, a partnership between the IGBC and Trinity College Dublin. It was very much a project that built upon previous work that we had been doing at the IGBC and in Trinity, really showing that protecting and enhancing biodiversity in new residential development was happening in Ireland, but it wasn't happening at scale. So based on that, we really tried to develop recommendation to ensure really it becomes a new norm through all the new housing development. So as part of this project, I would like to acknowledge the work of my colleagues, Dr. Marcus Colliers and Fiona Nulty from Trinity College Dublin, but also my colleague Irene Randini, and the close to 100 key stakeholders that took part in that research, being through structured interview and focus group meetings and workshops that we did organize in 2025. So really what I would like to do today as part of this session is to share the key insight from the BioNeighbors project. So really like our key recommendation to protect and enhance biodiversity in new residential development, but also as much as possible to try to share practical action that you can already take as a policymaker, being at national or local authority level, or as a researcher, or as someone in the industry to protect biodiversity in new development. But before I even do that, I just would like to give some context. So did you know that really like construction and the built environment is associated with 4 of the 5 main causes of biodiversity losses that has been identified by the IPBES, which really are around changes in land use, being through fragmentation or destruction of habitat, climate change, obviously, pollution, and also invasive alien species. One thing I would like to stress as well is although our project very much focused on protecting and enhancing biodiversity on site, so really like where new housing are being developed, really you have a lot of research showing that a lot of the impact actually happen off-site. And by that, I mean through the extraction of raw material, virgin material, and production process. So in the same way that you have embodied carbon impact, we have embodied ecological ecological impact. I'm not going to cover that today, but I've included a number of resources at the end of the presentation that you can look at in your own time, because I think it's an important topic. In the UK, it's estimated that it can be up to 90% of the actual impact. And you have a lot of very interesting resources available on this topic. Saying that, there's also a lot of things that we can do through a well-designed built environment to protect and enhance biodiversity. And as you can see through some of these studies, it's not only good for biodiversity, it's also very good for people's health and well-being and for society. I think we are all aware of that at the moment in Europe through the heat wave that we have seen, but it's also good for other things such as mental health, etc. So looking more specifically at the finding of the Bio Neighbors project, and again, to give you some context, I suppose when we started working on this project, what was clear to us is that we clearly identify a growing recognition of the need to integrate biodiversity and landscape-led consideration into the planning and delivery of residential development. You have many drivers there, being in terms of upcoming regulation, upcoming or existing policy, being at national or European level, but also in terms of a clear demand from investors. And again, all of that is linked. It's not only about protecting biodiversity, it's also very much related to climate adaptation. In an Irish context, if we look at policy and existing policy, you can clearly see that in the latest National Biodiversity Action Plan, which call for a whole of government, whole of society approach, and which requires public service bodies to integrate biodiversity into their plans, policies, and programs. And we obviously also see that in the various climate action plans that have been published. More specifically, what is interesting there is to look at planning and more specifically at the national planning framework, which is on a legal footing through the Planning and Development Act, because in the national planning framework, you have a number of national policy objectives that are worth mentioning, in particular the NPO 85, which very much focus on the importance of the mitigation hierarchy, and I'm just going to explain in a moment what that is. But also, I think what is interesting is for NPO 88, which very much call for the protection and restoration of biodiversity as part of planning, and highlight the need for guidance on planning and biodiversity, so more standardized guidance. And you also clearly can see that in the latest NDP. Now, if we go back to the mitigation hierarchy, I'm mentioning that because that's something that came up time again and again through the consultation process, the importance of focusing on the mitigation hierarchy as the best way to ensure nature consideration are taken into account at all stages of the process. And it's also most of the time the cheapest and most cost-effective approach to protecting and enhancing biodiversity. So really the idea there is focusing on avoiding development in places that are highly biodiversity rich, and minimizing impact as much as possible. And when this cannot be done, really try to repair unavoidable ecological impact. And the last aspect is very much around offsetting. So clearly like a strong focus on the mitigation hierarchy, both at policy level, but also as part of the consultation process we run as part of Bio Neighbors. I also would like to mention as I said again, like if you look at the Planning and Development Act 2024, it provides for the development of national planning statements to replace the current ministerial guidelines. So really, and what is interesting there, it clearly mentioned that the NPS shall have regard to the protection of landscapes and feature of natural heritage, and also a strong focus again on the National Biodiversity Action Plan. At European level, I'm sure some of you may have seen that already, but as you probably know, Ireland and all the European member states needs to submit their first national nature restoration plan to the European Commission by September this year. In fact, a public consultation closed about 2 weeks ago. And what is interesting there is that it includes target for overall targets, but also target for specific habitats, and for the first time, like targets that relate specifically to urban ecosystems. That's under Article 8. But also what is interesting is there that you really have target both in terms of no net loss for green urban space and for tree canopy by 2030, and then clearly calling for a steady increase thereafter. And what is interesting there as well is that part of this nature restoration plan, we need to include information in terms of funding for nature restoration and all that can be done. So really what I'm trying to say there is that this research was extremely timely in terms of a policy context and in terms of drivers. Notwithstanding that, I'm not saying there are no challenges in terms of protecting and enhancing biodiversity in the built environment. We had identified a number of challenges prior to this project, but the first thing we did as part of BioNeighbors was to try to refine the challenges associated with protection and enhancement of biodiversity in new residential development, really to try to understand why it was happening, but not happening at scale. One thing that came across very strongly through the research is that at the moment we see a strong inconsistency of approaches and requirement across local authorities, across islands, and really which create potential risk around litigation, and which make it more difficult as well for public or private developers to know exactly what to do. It's also what we see is too often perhaps a fragmented site-based planning rather than an overall landscape strategy. And by that, I mean quite often an approach that very much look at red line boundaries of a site in terms of improving biodiversity without looking at the overall landscape. And sometimes it might make sense, to do a little bit of biodiversity in one space. It's if overall you are protecting it in terms of the various ecological corridors at county level and so on. And that's why one of the recommendations of the project is very much about having very strong ecological mapping across the country. What we saw as well is very much a late or limited involvement of ecologists, and the consequence, which are not really often part of the full project team, and the consequence of that is it can be more expensive and more difficult actually to protect biodiversity if ecologists are not involved from day one. And we have very good case studies on that, showing that if actually, I see somebody that was involved in the development of that case study that is there at the moment, but we have a very good case study on, it's an hospital, it's in Portrane in Dublin, but what you see there is by involving ecologists from day one, they were able to make substantial savings, because instead of incorporating a traditional water attenuation tank, they were able to redirect some of the overflow to wetland nearby. So really that's one challenge that we see. We also often see lack or limited enforcement and maintenance, which can lead to biodiversity loss over time. And that's also related to the fact that often we don't have enough funding for consideration for maintenance. Just to give you an example, you may plan for a nice meadow, but then over time it just it just become like a standard normal loan, or you may just consider introducing a permeable surface that over time are replaced by tarmac, which actually leads over time to a biodiversity loss. We see labor and skill shortages, and not only in terms of ecologists, but also in terms of specific skills such as botany, but also across the board. Really what we figure out as part of the project is a need for minimum understanding across the industry of the importance and benefit of protecting biodiversity. And all of these barriers lead overall to a perception of biodiversity as a constraint or an additional cost, often, as opposed to seeing it as an opportunity actually to improve people's health and well-being and to make cost savings and so on. So based on that, then we developed a number of recommendations. We have 18 recommendations in the report. You can download the report through that link. And we have recommendation at national, local, and stakeholder level. Obviously, there are many overlaps between these recommendations. I'm going to have a look at them in detail in a moment, but at national level, very much what we were calling for and what stakeholders were calling for is the need for more coordination, so a need for a national strategy on biodiversity in the built environment centered around the mitigation hierarchy. At local level, as I've already mentioned, a clear need for clarity and consistency in the top consideration and protection of nature in relation to planning, land use zoning, and development standards. And then at stakeholder level, it's all about, I suppose, engaging all stakeholders from industry to academia at all stages of the process to ensure the best outcome on the ground. So let's have a look at the national levels first. As I said there, it was very clear from everyone that we need more coordination and that this overall national strategy need to be centered around the mitigation hierarchy. So by that, I mean there is a clear need to assign responsibility for biodiversity within the development process from national to project level to clearly know who is responsible for what and when. Then there is also a strong call to review existing standards and guidelines to ensure not only that all policy are fully aligned, consistent, but also perhaps to better rationalize them. And this is absolutely key, I guess, in terms of addressing contradiction across policy and in simplifying the compliance process and limiting, I guess, litigation risk and increasing costs. As part of that, it's absolutely critical then that there is one national planning statement on nature and biodiversity development, so that we have that clarity, but also what we saw also the need like really for very good national ecological mapping strategy and the single nationally agreed method for measuring biodiversity in new development, because in the absence of that, we may have different local authorities, different bodies using different methodology, making things much more expensive and much more difficult, and ultimately leading to a poorer outcome. Another thing that was mentioned as well is really the need to perhaps better use like publicly funded projects to adhere to higher biodiversity requirements. So really the need there for public bodies to lead by example. And just to give you a small example, I was visiting my family recently in the south of France, and just to give you like, I really struggled to convince like my own father to let an area that wasn't a no-more area in the place. He was very against it, but then he saw that the local authority was doing that, and he did say, oh, wow, actually they are doing it, so we should do that. So really, it's a small thing, but I think it really illustrates the case for the importance of leading by example for the public sector. And also a call at national level to increase funding to build workforce capacity and actually deliver on green and blue infrastructure and nature-based solution project. And really what, in terms of key action there that you can take if you're like a policymaker, maybe at national level, is really to call really for the development and implementation of a coordinated national framework on biodiversity and planning in the built environment, for a common national standardized measurements tool for sites zoned for development, but also to provide practical standardized guidance document and template to inform master planning and site layout. And what I would like to highlight there really is, I suppose, these three key actions, three key recommendations at national level in the grand scheme of things would be relatively cheap to implement and could have a significant impact. And really the time to do it, we believe, and the stakeholder did really clearly tell us to do it, is now, because not only we have to develop our nature restoration plan and to invest in this action by the end of the year, we have our next development plan, local authorities development plan, that are going to be published in the next few years, and they're going to be valid for 10 years now. And the third point is very much, if you look at European level, in Ireland, we need to develop a lot of new housing, new infrastructure in the next 15 years or so. And really, if we don't get it right, it will be far more expensive to actually retrofit, and difficult to retrofit this action, not to mention the biodiversity we may lose by not taking action now. At local level, as I said, if at national level, we very much called for coordination, it was all about clarity and consistency of approaches in relation to planning, land use zoning, and development standard. So the overall message there is that where we have policy in place, they must be stringent, but where sites are zoned for development, we need really for strong support for project teams on how to develop while protecting biodiversity. So really, what does that mean in practical terms? It means developing evidence-based mapping to support the implementation of the mitigation hierarchy based on the national method, again, so that we have this coordination approach. It means very much strengthening existing planning and development procedure to protect biodiversity. I mean, example of that could include better protecting biodiversity as part of planning validation checklist and a condition procedure with, for instance, like we have biodiversity checklists that are already in use in Northern Ireland. I know the NPWS are looking at that as well in the Republic of Ireland, but also trying to better integrate the various requirements at early stage, being, for instance, in terms of protecting biodiversity or sustainable urban drainage system, for instance, as the best way really to secure the best outcome and to do it in a more resource efficient way. And as I've already said, the need really to promote multidisciplinary collaboration, cooperation, being within the local authority or really across projects. So in terms of practical action that came out as part of the research, again, as I've said, the need to further promote multidisciplinary cooperation internally, to upskill in biodiversity in the built environment, and really to share case study, best practice, and also, if you are comfortable with that, I suppose, to share our mistakes and fix, so that we can really learn from each other. And just to have some example of things, action that have already been taken there. There was a very large workshop in April in terms of protection and enhancement of biodiversity in the built environment with 6 local authorities. That was 10 local authorities that was organized in Portlaoise in April, just to share. But that's really some of the best practice, but something that came again and again as part of the research. The last part very much relate to the stakeholder level and the need to engage all stakeholders to ensure the best outcome on the ground. So that means really a clear need for everyone in the industry, and not only ecologists, because it's not only about ecologists to upskill in biodiversity, in enhancement, in new development. In terms of education providers, the need to clearly develop practical, short training modules to incentivize upskilling, because clearly it's not realistic to ask everyone to complete a 1 month training course or anything like that. So we need practical short training modules. We also need over time to review existing apprenticeship and construction related third level courses to ensure like ecology and biodiversity are fully embedded in the construction industry. But also very much like probably a need to promote opportunities offered by careers when protecting and enhancing biodiversity in the built environment, including ecology and botany, but perhaps in the same way that it has been done over the years in relation to STEM. We need a similar approach for these careers. And last but not least, we need really like more high quality research in an Irish context to support best practice and fill knowledge gaps, because we do have a lot of research existing in other jurisdictions, some of them in the UK, but it's very limited in terms of the specific Irish context. So that's it for me. A huge thanks again for you to listen to my presentation. I've included a number of resources there, including the finding of the report and also links to the case studies that have been developed in terms of protecting and enhancing biodiversity in the built environment. Some more resources there that you may want to have a look at in your own time, including on embodied ecological impact, for instance. But again, a huge thanks for your time and to the Housing Agency for the support. Looking forward to the Q&A. Thank you.